Hey, what's up guys? Fish Tank Mike here. Today we're kicking off pond season 3 with a mini pond that we're going to build up here on my deck. This is going to be just one example of the many ways you can make a mini pond. So I actually wrote a blog post that goes into a lot more detail than what we're going to talk about today. I'll have a link for it at the top of the description. We're going to set it up right here next to last year's little pond. So this is like a planter tub that has no holes, and it held I think roughly 10 gallons of water, maybe closer to 8. It ended up not having any fish in it. It just housed a few plants. As you can see, there's still a few left in here that made it through the winter, but we're going to be taking those as well as some other ones, and we're going to be setting up this nice little 16-gallon tub. This is a galvanized steel tub. People fill these up with ice and put drinks in them. They plant plants in them. They do all kinds of sort of things with them, but today we're going to obviously be turning it into a pond. This does have a zinc coating on it, and I've heard some people raise concerns about whether or not that's getting leached into the water, although I have seen people that have set up things just like this for several years and not have any problems. So we're going to go for it. So obviously the first step is to find whatever kind of vessel you want your pond to be, and I would recommend sticking to something that's at least 5 gallons. If you're planning on putting fish in it, then obviously the bigger the better. Step 2 for us is an optional one. We're going to be adding in some substrate here. This is some Monterey beach sand, and you don't have to do this. I'm doing it because I ultimately want to plant aquarium plants down in the bottom of it. You don't have to just stick to sand if you're going to go the substrate route. You could even use some aquarium active substrate like we have here. You could use pea gravel, cement sand, whatever you want. So there we have about 2.5 gallons, maybe 3 of this sand. It's enough to get probably at least an inch all the way around. The next step is going to be adding in a few bricks here, and this is to give some of the plants that we have a little bit more height, and so we get them just out of the top of the water. I'm going to put these kind of towards the back here, and we might need 2 here, or we might need 1. Let's go ahead and check. I'm not too familiar with a lot of these plants. You can check that tag out, but I think actually just 1 brick is going to be enough for this thing. If you have the room, you can repot in something like this, like a mesh pot, that's going to allow you to get a lot better water flow. But for something like this, because this is going to take up so much more room, we're going to stick with the original pots that they came in and just knife the sides of it to create more flow. All 3 of the pots sit just underneath where I think the level of the water is going to be, so they should be pretty hidden. Now that we have a few plants in, we're not done yet. Let's go ahead and let's fill this thing up. So we have very easy access to water here. We have a hose that comes up to the deck, so we can just fill it on up. 16 gallons of water later, and we now have a full tub. There's a little bit of bowing going on, but I think it's totally fine. I brought up one of these water hyacinths from the greenhouse pond because I wanted to put this in here. Gotta have some floating plants. They add a lot to it. Hey, look, there's a ladybug on there. There's also a little bit of smaller sylvinia in here that once it grows out, it's gonna float up here and start to conceal these pots a little bit more. And we do have some more spots that we could add some more plants, guys. There's an area right here, and we could even start bringing out some plants over here if we wanted to, but we gotta keep in mind we do wanna maintain a little bit of swimming room in here because we will eventually be adding fish to this. Now, I think an important thing to talk about is how you're gonna filter your little pond. Over on this pond last summer, we went with a solar pump. So we have a panel up there, and it's driving one of these teeny tiny little, I think they're like 200 liters per hour pumps. This one sucks, although I did get a new one that is a lot more powerful. These solar pumps are pretty expensive for what you get, and I will say, like, while this is enough flow for something like this, you can easily get something that's even more powerful if that's what you want for a lot less, as long as you can plug it in. So that's going to be an important thing to keep in mind when you're setting up your little mini pond. Is it next to an electrical outlet? We have one over here on the opposite side of the deck that's plugged into an extension cord that runs the greenhouse, so I'm not really looking to take up my last plug to run this pond, so we are going to go ahead and use one of those solar pumps. And hopefully we can get it to suction cup to the side of this thing. There we go. I'll put a link to this solar pump that I like, guys, in the description so you can check it out. But just keep that in mind. If you have easy access to an outlet, you can use a wide range of all sorts of different pumps. Even small aquarium power heads work really good. Obviously, AWASA, the Optimax pumps, are super high quality and last a long time. But it's really just up to you and what your circumstances are. How big's your pond? How much flow do you need? It can be kind of tough to know that, especially if you're new. Something like this, where we're going to put in even more plants, you could put in fish and you could not even have a filter and probably be just fine. But I do like to have a little bit of water circulation. It helps out everything, so I'm still going to recommend that. Even small hang-on back filters can work, guys, so you have an opportunity here to be really creative with the filtration if you want to. I'm sure even a canister filter, if you have a larger pond, would also work. But just remember, guys, that if you're planning on having a lot of pond plants in your little pond, you're probably not going to really require a filter to remove a lot of that nitrogen. If you're making one of these for yourself, guys, make sure you have all the right tools. We got our Fritz stuff here. We got our pond guard to get rid of our chlorine. We're going to add that, and then we're going to add in some turbo start to help get the bacterial cycle going on this, so any fish that we add to it are safe and ready to go. Something I also want to mention is the plants. So these I got at a local garden center, and these pots were $15 each. So we're already looking at $45 just for these 3 plants. Finding yourself some cheap plants is definitely going to help keep the budget down. The water hyacinths, I think no matter where you get them, they're going to be pretty cheap. You are able to find some good sources for pond plants online, but you're typically not going to receive them as big as you might want them. In the blog post that I wrote, I go over a few different types of plants that you can find online. A lot of them are floaters, but some of them are some of these larger ones that do look pretty good. So just check that out. Okay, guys, we're out here the next day checking out the pond. We're getting some sun. It's probably about noon right now, and everything's looking really good. The water's cleared up, and because we put in that beneficial bacteria, we could, in theory, add fish today, no problem. But we are going to hold off on that because we're just waiting for the golden white cloud minnows upstairs to get a little bit bigger, and then we're going to put them in here. I can't recommend that you put a ton of really big goldfish or koi into something like this. You're going to want to stick with some smaller fish like the golden white cloud minnows. There's a bunch of other really hardy outdoor pond fish that you could put in here that are smaller that would be perfect for this, and I'll mention some more of those in the blog post. Because we have the sun directly hitting our panel here, our solar pump is going full blast, and it typically runs most of the day, but once you get into the evening, then it's going to cut its power. It's going to be really sporadic, and it essentially doesn't work. I just thought I'd mention that. Not a big deal because, again, we're not really relying on it all so much. And while I didn't break down the total cost of this pond here in this video, I'll do it again in the blog post, so go check that out. These things are not super expensive to set up. The one that you're looking at right here is a little bit more expensive because we are using a $50 solar pump. So if you cut that down, you use something you already have, that's obviously going to save you a ton, and you can easily set something like this up for under $100 and maybe even close to $50, depending on what you end up using to make the pond itself. This tub, which there's a link for it in the description, ended up costing $41. I did get it on Amazon, so I don't know if that's kind of an inflated price, but you could certainly have something like this laying around your house. There's a lot of ways to make these truly DIY with things that you have laying around. I'm pretty sure I ended up getting this thing at Lowe's for like $15, and it's a great little pond. It's just really nice to hang out here on the deck and have this awesome thing that I've made. I get to look over and eventually look at fish, and I highly recommend these things if you guys have a little outdoor space. There's another thing that I want to mention about pond placement, besides the fact that you might want to be next to an electrical outlet, is that you probably don't want to have these under complete all-day full sun, especially when you have small water volumes, because that can really cause temperature fluctuations that won't be good if you have fish in it. If you don't have any fish in your pond, then it doesn't really matter all too much. The plants will be just fine. But the shallower your pond is, especially, the more that temperature is going to fluctuate. So I do recommend, if you are going to be keeping fish, get a little digital cheap thermometer off of Amazon and check the temperature flux throughout the day. If you're going from 60 degrees at night to over 100 in the day, then you're not going to want to put fish in your pond. You're going to want to consider moving moving it to a shaded area or just go the fishless route. I'm not sure what the temperature flux in this thing's going to be, so we're going to definitely check that before we add fish. So yeah guys, that's pretty much it for the video. I hope you learned a cool way to set up a little mini pond. We're going to be decking this one out in the next episode, as well as making some more modifications to this guy. We're going to put in some aquarium plants in the substrate, and again, go check out the blog post. It's the top link in the description. It goes way more into detail as far as the different things that you can use for a mini deck pond, so make sure you check that out and let me know what you think about it. I'm going to try and do that more, make some blog posts that go along with videos to help give you guys more information. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to check out the Pond Season 3 playlist, and you can also check out the Pond Season 2 and Pond Season 1 playlist if you want to see how we've gotten up to this point so far. So thanks again for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.